Hi, I'm Gerry. Welcome to my studio. This is the second part of my tutorial on how to paint trees, and this time I'll be looking at how to paint trees in winter. A tree comprises roots, trunk, bough, branches, twigs and leaves. The roots anchor the tree in the ground and spread out to provide a stable foundation. The trunk, boughs, branches and twigs get smaller in diameter as they grow higher and spread out from the trunk. It was Leonardo da Vinci who first came up with the theory that trees follow a universal growth pattern. What does that mean? He said that when a trunk divides into branches, when you add up the thickness of the branches, they equal the thickness of the trunk that they came from. Let's have a look at that. In this diagram, trunk A has divided into branch C and continues as a reduced trunk B. If you add together the thickness of C and B, they will equal the thickness of A. How does this knowledge help us to draw and paint trees? So if we start with the thick trunk of a tree, and we let that divide into a branch, so a branch splits off from the trunk, we know that the trunk as it continues is going to reduce by the thickness of this one. So that this trunk, the thickness of this trunk will equal the sum of that one plus that one. The other interesting thing is that it doesn't matter how far this branch goes before it divides itself, it stays the same thickness all the way along until another one branches off of it. And then that one reduces, and maybe you have another one coming off the top of there and it reduces again. But between the point at which these things branch away or divide from the main stem, it's always the same. The sum of the pieces that break off must be the same thickness as or equal the thickness of the branch that they come from. I hope that's clear. If we continue this one, let's say that that one divides into two. Then these two thicknesses must add up to the thickness of this one. And that's the guiding principle of the universal growth pattern. I hope that makes it clear. The important thing to remember is that between the points at which they divide, they stay the same, the branches or twigs or whatever they are, stay the same thickness. They do not taper. I've seen many paintings where the artist shows the branches and the twigs and everything tapering. Branches on trees do not taper like carrots. They stay. This photograph truly illustrates the universal growth pattern. Just look at this long branch extending out here to the right. Over its complete length it remains the same width. Here, as the trunk rises and we take off a very large branch to the right, the trunk reduces in size beyond it. And this is repeated over the whole of the structure of this tree, even down. It should also be noted that different species of tree do not divide and branch in the same way, and this affects the form and shape of the whole tree. The other thing that defines a tree is the type of bark on the trunk, but you have to be really close up and personal with a tree for this to be seen in your painting. I took these photos this morning while walking the dogs and was surprised how many samples I could gather in a short time. The trunks of trees also split and divide in different ways. Too often when people draw or paint a tree from memory, they show a single trunk rising and branching symmetrically. This is seldom the case in nature. It should also be remembered when studying trees that the branches spread out 360 degrees from the bole. There are as many branches reaching out towards you and spreading away as there are splaying out sideways. Well, that's enough of the theory. Let's get on and paint some trees. And as I've said earlier, when we're painting trees in landscapes, we're not doing the portrait of an individual tree. Trees are either in woodlands or in copses or in the distance. So on the sketches that I'm going to do as a demonstration, I'm not going to do a portrait of a tree. I'm going to set it into a simple landscape. Now I'm going to place a tree in a simple landscape setting. I've first blocked in the sky and I'm laying in a stand of trees in the middle distance using the flat face of the brush to create texture. Later I'll add a number of darker lines to suggest the tree trunks. In the foreground I'm going to paint a grass field using a lighter tone of tertiary grey-green. I can define the profile of the tree against the sky using a dry flat brush. The dry paint picks up the texture of the board to give the impression of fine twigs, and care must be taken to get the correct tonal balance. Next I detail the main structure of the trunks, boughs and branches with a darker tone that blends with the middle distance trees at the base and gives a strong silhouette against the sky in the upper reaches. I work out from the base in the direction of growth, gradually reducing the size of the branches until they disappear as very fine lines into the dry scumble of twigs at the extremities. This stage cannot be rushed. The skeleton of a mature tree in winter is very challenging and requires patience. Constantly review your progress in detailing the tracery and decide when you have sufficient representation of the tree without overworking it. I return to the middle distance trees and add a few lines representing tree trunks and dashes of bright colour to give more credence and interest. I've set a second tree just proud of the middle distance tree line and brush in a lighter tertiary tone to suggest the twigs. The addition of simple cabins at the edge of the field creates a focal point, and finally some lighter brush strokes on the tree indicate branches stretching out towards you, catching the sunlight and creating a three-dimensional feel to the tree. This is the finished sketch. In this example of trees in winter, I have expressly chosen a landscape with no distinctive single tree. The main feature will be a diagonal stand of aspen trees that have lost their leaves and have a winter crown of willowy branches and twigs. It's a snow scene, and these trees are growing in line along the top of a ridge above a deep valley. On the opposite side of this valley are snow-clad hills with evergreen forests that form a patchwork on the lower slopes. There are individual trees dotted along the tree line. These require no detail because they're so far away, but it's important to record the dark pattern of trees accurately. Choosing a darker tone, I paint in the contours of the crowns of the nearest trees, laying my brush flat to create a broken edge. I work some warmer colours into this passage to indicate sunlight, just clipping the edge of the canopy. To fill in the main body of this tree mass, I then switch to using the brush tip. And now I can draw down vertical brush strokes to texture this area. It's a large dark mass and relies upon brush strokes and subtle changes in tone and colour to add interest. Next I use a fine sable brush to add the tree trunks. The trunks of aspen are silver, like the silver birch, but I choose a dark tone to silhouette them against the brightness and glare of snow in sunlight. In this passage I slow myself down, so that the brushstrokes are clean and elegant in sharp contrast to the broad brushed canopy above. Once I'm satisfied with the tree trunks, I concentrate on the shadow patterns in the snow and work backwards and forwards between the tree trunks, the shadows and patches of sunlight. Finally, I change to shorter brush strokes, using dots and dashes in subtly different tones and colours to liven up the tree canopy. Don't forget that by using different sizes and shapes of brush and constantly varying your brush strokes using the tip, edge or flat of the brush, this will add rhythm and texture to the plainest areas of your paintings. I achieve colour harmony by using tertiary colours and greys with highlights of secondary colours, and use tonal contrast and tonal scale to help the composition and create the right atmosphere. It's these techniques that help to enhance the simplest landscape painting. And this is the result, a snowscape with the light just catching the tops of the trees to set back the distance of the far side of the valley. So that's that, and if you're learning to paint, I hope you've found this useful. Next time I'm going to be painting trees in summer, and I hope you can join me then.